Thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar. I will be your moderator, and before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping items to go over. First, this webinar will be recorded and will be available beginning tomorrow morning on the LiveWell Colorado website. To access the recording, simply visit livewellcolorado.org, click on the LiveWell's Commitment tab, click on Research and Publications, and select Webinars. A recording and a PDF of the PowerPoint presentation, along with an evaluation survey, will also be sent out in a follow-up email tomorrow as well. Also, we will have some time for question and answer at the end of the webinar, so I encourage you to submit your questions throughout the presentation, and if possible, please note who your question is directed to. We have 3 great panelists today that will hopefully get all of your questions answered. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Walford.
Thank you very much, Kate, and thank you to all of you who have joined today's call. We're excited to share with you 3 outstanding speakers to talk about some of the tools and trainings, different programs that are available to connect beginning farmers to land and other resources in Colorado. I think we can pass around. We've got both some national and Colorado speakers we will hear from. We've got 3 different presentations for you. The first is Sophie Ackoff, who's going to talk about organizing for the collective success of our new farmers through policy change and strong networks. We have David Lynch, who's going to be talking about addressing the challenges of land access for the next generation of farmers. And then Adrian Card will wrap it up with building farmers in Colorado. And again, we will have time for Q&A, so please do submit your questions as we go throughout. So we always like to share pictures of everybody so you know who it is that's speaking. And with that, I'd like to introduce Sophie Ackoff as our first speaker from the National Young Farmers Coalition. She's the Membership and Development Coordinator of this coalition, which is a network of farmers, ranchers, and supportive consumers fighting for the future of farming. She's worked for Food and Water Watch in education and outreach and has farmed on several community-supported agriculture farms in the beautiful Hudson Valley of New York. And without anything further, Sophie, we'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Lisa. So yes, I am Sophie, and I'm with the National Young Farmers Coalition. And we are a national coalition of young farmers, ranchers, and as Lisa mentioned, supportive consumers, all working together for the collective success of the next generation of farmers and ranchers. And so we work as a grassroots advocacy organization. So we help farmers on the ground start local chapters of NYFC that are there to tackle local barriers to farming. And then we work all together as a national coalition to change policy to make it more supportive of us. So next slide, please. We started just 4 years ago in the Hudson Valley of New York, which is where I am farming and organizing. And it's the home base of the National Young Farmers Coalition. And we came about, there was a group of young farmers here who were really having trouble growing their farm businesses because of some challenges, especially accessing affordable farmland. Farmland can be prohibitively expensive here and across the country. Accessing startup capital, getting credit, so low-interest loans to grow their farm business, and accessing training, getting health care, and a few other things. And they realized that these challenges were shared with other farmers in the Hudson Valley, but also farmers all across the country. So there were young farmers getting organized in Connecticut and Michigan, and they decided that a national coalition was needed to really raise the voice of young farmers to make change on a national scale and create a unified movement. So NYFC was born. And so we work in 3 program areas. Next slide. Policy change, which I will get into, innovative solutions, and powerful alliances. So innovative solutions, we started the Farm Hack Project, which brings together farmers to innovate technology that is better suited for the scale and ethics of our farms. Farm Hack is now its own nonprofit, but we still continue to plan Farm Hacks, and we actually had one in the West Slope of Colorado last year to work together to find solutions for more innovative approaches to water conservation in the West, which is, of course, a huge issue for farmers and everyone. We also have an online farmers forum where farmers can communicate and ask each other questions, creating national conversation among farmers. And we encourage farmer-to-farmer learning in our chapters and on the national level. And Powerful Alliances is our network of chapters. So we have 22 right now in 21 states. And these chapters bring farmers together to learn and share and build stronger communities of young farmers. So they plan crop mobs, have farm tours, work with elected officials, really identify what are the challenges to young farmers in a particular area, and work together to solve them. So NIC is very farmer-driven. Our board is made up of farmers and some supportive farm service providers, but we have 25,000 farmers, ranchers, and consumers to support us to make it an easier country to start a farm. So when we first started, back in 2010, we decided to survey 1,000 young farmers and figure out what are the challenges that we're facing so that we can put together a platform, policy platform to change, to address those issues. So we found that the majority of new farmers are not coming from farm families. So next slide. And therefore face a whole set of unique challenges. So as you can see, 78%. And so they need to find affordable land, they need startup capital and credit, and they need training because they didn't grow up in farm families learning how to farm from a young age. The farmers in our network are also, first, you can see vegetable is the majority. Starting off with vegetable production because it has the lowest startup cost, but young farmers are really coming at it from a wide range, doing livestock, dairy, grain, etc. And the majority are also farming organically, so not necessarily having USDA organic certification because there are a lot of barriers to that, the National Organic Program, but they are motivated to farm to create healthy food systems in their communities. Next. And our coalition is but young and beginning, so anyone young to farming is welcome in our coalition, and we focus on issues affecting first career farmers. But as you can see, the majority are in their first through fifth years of farming, and are getting trained and then are needing support in launching their farm businesses. And so we found, sort of just as we had imagined, that the biggest challenges to starting a farm are lack of capital, land access, healthcare, and access to credit. So these are the major campaigns that we have sort of folded into our policy platform, which I will talk about next. And the things that are working are apprenticeships. So young farmers are not necessarily going to ag schools, but are working more directly with mentor farmers to gain skills, and this is a really great way to start farming. Local partnerships are really essential to the success of the next generation. Young farmers are selling direct to consumers, which gives them a greater price on their crops and really allows their farms to survive. And community-supported agriculture is an example of that, where community members invest in a farm at the beginning of the season and then get a share of what is produced all through the season. And this really allows a farmer to buy important things for the season at the beginning, like a new tractor or a high tunnel or seed money. Next. So I just wanted to sort of hit home the point that land is increasingly expensive across the United States. This is the national averages, and land has doubled in the last 10 years. So this is an issue of utmost importance to address. So what have we done thus far, and what are our major campaigns? So we really came together 4 years ago because we wanted a young farmer voice in the Farm Bill. And the Farm Bill is the major legislation that dictates agricultural policy in the U.S. And there is, there has been money for beginning farmers specifically. And so we work together with the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition and its member groups to write the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Opportunity Act. And we introduced that into Congress in 2011 and 2013. So we rallied farmers all across the states to have meetings with their representatives to tell them about the importance of this Beginning Farmer Rancher Opportunity Act and to become champions for young farmers. So we were successful. It's a marker bill, so it contains provisions that, if included in the Farm Bill, would help young farmers, and 2/3 of the programs made it into the final bill. So that really shows the strength of a national coalition of farmers. So the beginning farmer training programs were fully funded. The new microloan program that we encouraged the Farm Service Agency to pass last year is now a permanent program. Young farmers can access up to $35,000 of low-interest money to kick off their farm business. We've also been active in the FDA food safety rule process. The rules came out last year and really threatened the viability of small farms. So we had a national day of action where young farmers wrote letters, handwritten letters to the FDA to tell them how the food safety rules would impact their farm business. And the FDA listened, and they're going to come out with revised rules later this year. We are also in the farmlands piece that I've been talking about. We just did a survey of 200 land trusts all across the country and surveyed their knowledge of and use of tools to make land not only protected but affordable to farmers. And we found that there are some really innovative land trusts, especially on the coast of the United States, that there needs to be a lot of professional development and incentives for the land trust community to put land in conservation, but to also make sure that the land is in production and that it is sold to working farmers. And then the fourth big issue is USDA program reform. So there are so many programs out there already for farmers, so we need to make sure that farmers are able to access them who are not necessarily commodity farmers, but are having diversified operations. And there's a lot of barriers in applying to those programs. So we just had a major victory on the facilities loan, which offers farmers money to build, wash and pack stations, storage, grain silos, et cetera. And we worked with the USDA to make the application easier if you're a diversified farmer, and also that there's an exemption, so you don't necessarily have to get crop insurance, which was a big barrier. And this is a photo of a farmers forum that we had in the Hudson Valley last year, right before the Farm Bill really took off, with our elected officials on the state and national level, where young farmers stood up and told their story and asked for what they needed to thrive as farmers in the district. So we're having events like this in the Hudson Valley and all across the country to get young farmers involved in the policy process. And we are very active in the West. So we have a Colorado organizer, Kate Greenberg. She is in Durango, and she is building chapters in the West. So we have a chapter in Mesa County, Colorado, and in Durango, and some momentum in Boulder and Denver. And we're also really active in Colorado River Day that just happened this past summer. With the Colorado River Collaborative, we brought farmers together and elected officials in 5 western cities to speak to the press on the importance of water conservation by both farms and cities. And we helped get nearly 70 elected officials from 5 western states to sign on to the Conservation First Pledge. So we are really activating farmers as spokespeople for water conservation. We're also serving on some water working groups to sort of develop NYC as a leader in ag water issues and making sure that young farmers have a voice in that. And I just wanted to talk a little bit more about our chapters. They are really tackling local challenges. The Hudson Valley Group has a cooperative buying club where we can access organic grain more affordably because we're bulk buying. We're building relationships with representatives. We're forming cooperative partnerships, and they're really important social networks, having farmers see that there are other young people out there farming, and then building friendships and partnerships from that. And to all those of you in Colorado, we encourage chapters to be as local as possible, so there's a lot of room for more chapter growth in Colorado, and I encourage you to reach out to us, organizing at youngfarmers.org if you're interested in helping organize a local NYC chapter in your region. So this is a group of young farmers meeting with Representative Tipton to encourage him to support the next generation. This is in Durango. And as I said, there's farmers in Mesa County and Durango, and lots of room to get involved, join the movement. And with that, I just want to encourage you to consider joining our coalition. We are membership-driven, and it's very affordable, great benefits, and we really, the larger our coalition, the stronger our voices will be in our local counties and on the national level. So, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Sophie. Clearly, your voice is strong, and so I do encourage those of you on the phone who are young farmers or who have those networks. I know some of you work with other young farmers to pass this around to them, and as Kate mentioned, we will provide follow-up email that has all of these links directly, so you can access them very quickly. Sophie, I'm going to ask you a question right now for you to answer later. Wondering if you can help people with finding more information on both the training programs and the microloans that were approved in the Farm Bill. So if you've got it quick top of mind that you can answer that now, that'd be great. Otherwise, we can ask it again in the Q&A.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So our website has a wealth of resources. It's youngfarmers.org, and you can get information on how to access the microloan program there.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So next up, we have David Lynch, who's the director of the Colorado Land Link, which is a program of Guidestone, Colorado. David's has operated a small-scale direct market farm enterprise for over 25 years and has been working in the nonprofit sector serving Colorado's agricultural community throughout that time. He's developing the Colorado Land Link program that assists aspiring farmers with farmland access and resources to achieve their dreams while providing retiring farmers and agricultural landowners with innovative ways to preserve their farms while meeting their retirement and estate planning goals. So with that, David, if you want to take us through your fabulous photos.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's good to be online and share with everybody a new emerging program here in Colorado. One of the things that's very clear to us is that we need to collaborate with organizations in order to increase awareness about the importance of making land available to the next generation. So working with the National Young Farmers Coalition, we recently had them make a presentation at the annual Land Link Forum we held here. And certainly it's very important to be working with partners like Colorado State University Extension Building Farmers Training Program, which you'll hear from in just a little bit. But I do want to emphasize that by working with partners such as CSU Extension and with the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, we are working together to roll out this Colorado Land Link program statewide. Next slide. Next. Okay, there it comes. I just want to emphasize here, we'll move through these slides pretty quickly, but the inspiration behind Land Link is to help preserve Colorado's agricultural heritage, and that's the family farm. To preserve farm and ranch lands, next slide, and to ensure that our water resources are tied to the land and are preserved for active agriculture. Next slide. and that we have access to local food, next slide, that will provide our communities with access to healthy food choices and tie our families back to the land in our given regions, and that we provide land opportunities for new beginning farmers such as this one who has just obtained farmland access from a landowner in our area. Next slide. And that our next generation family farmers have opportunity to have long-term security in the communities where they live so that there is tenure that ensures them that they can grow their business and be part of the community. Next slide. So let's just quickly talk about the trends in farmland ownership. This is USDA data that has come out, and I think it makes a case for land length. Only a quarter of farmers own the land that they farm. That's not very many. Twice as many farmers over the age of 65 as under 35. And the next two data points, I think, are really key to help us understand we're at a pivotal point in American agriculture, and we need to work on solutions here. 70% of U.S. farms will transition over the next 15 years, and over 400 million acres of farmland are expected to change hands in the next 20 years. Next slide. And Sophie already shared this information about a survey that was conducted with over, I think, 1,000 young farmers across the country. But the first 2 points here really address this need for assistance with farmland access, because these are the issues that are preventing, or you might say hurdles, to accessing land or entering agriculture. 78% ranked lack of capital as a challenge, and 68% ranked land access as a challenge. Those two go hand in hand in terms of capitalizing your farm enterprise. Next slide. So land link programs around the country have identified these as the primary barriers for new farmers, next generation farmers, to enter agriculture. Sophie just addressed the cost of farmland. I think it was an 8% increase in farmland real estate in the last 10 years nationally, but we're seeing an increase, a much higher increase in Colorado. Available farmland, we have a groundswell, I would call it, of new farmers who don't have farmland, but there's very little farmland availability out there, and that has to do with landowners. So we need to address that issue. Declining farm profitability, the cost of inputs are outpacing the actual revenue stream coming in from agricultural products. So those margins are narrowing. And then the insecurity of rental and lease agreements. And here's where it becomes very difficult for the next generation, because what we observe is many young farmers only have a oral or even a handshake lease, or at best a one-year rollover lease. So we need to work on solutions. Next slide. So this is our core goal. This is the work we're doing. We want to increase farm and ranching opportunities, increase farmland access. We want to ensure that the land opportunities are affordable, and that we have secure access to agricultural land so that these next generation farmers have a way to recoup their investment over time in any agricultural enterprise they undertake. We want to keep agricultural heritage and water on the land, which means help current landowners and retiring farmers and ranchers with preserving their farm legacy. And they need tools and assistance to make that happen. And then finally, transition non-productive farmland to productive agriculture, which simply means we need to look at those government properties and private non-farming landowners to see if we can transition those properties into productive agriculture. Next slide. All right, so these are the groups we've identified as why we are creating Colorado Land Link. Number one, aspiring beginning farmers and ranchers who don't own their own farmland or seeking farmland access. Retiring farmers and ranchers who need help naming a successor and then transitioning to that next generation farmer. Non-farming landowners, such as we see up here in our county. We've got the Colorado Corrections Institute with this huge acreage and very old water right that was a very productive farm for many years, is now laying abandoned. We're looking at how we might develop that into an agriculturally productive farm property again. And then finally, conservation groups. We're working with land trusts. We have a memorandum of understanding signed with several that basically identified LandLink as a tool to come up with candidates that have the resources, skill sets, and the ability to take over land that is held under conservation easement. Next slide. So these are the services that we've identified or we are creating through Colorado Land Link. One is a database that is an inventory of land listings and also a directory of next generation farmers or new farmers that are seeking land access. We have a service of technical and strategic support, which means we can help work in identifying all the key points that need to go into a lease and helping facilitate that lease agreement. We're working on access to education, training, and resources, and that is part of our collaboration with the Building Farmers Training Program. And then farm succession planning, which is becoming more an important issue as time goes on, as we need to have people who have the skill sets to go in and work with farm families that may involve several generations in helping them do the goal setting they need to think about a farm succession plan and a transfer plan to the next generation. Next slide. So our database, this is what we currently have, and I just thought you would enjoy seeing what's currently in our database here. We have over 130 new farmer applicants. On the other side of the picture, and the number is less than you see here on the screen at this point, we have probably 15 land listings. So the differential there is significant, the available farmland. We also have 25 states represented, primarily in that new farmer database, where there are a lot of farmers with skills and resources that want to relocate, don't own their own land, are seeking farmland access. Next slide. So I put together a summary of our database, and I just wanted to show you what we're looking at, because the people, their interests in operations are across the board, from doing ranching, raising cows and horses, to being market gardeners, to getting in and managing orchards. It's quite an evenly distributed interest. In terms of location, it's across the board in Colorado. It's pretty evenly distributed. But I was interested in the fact that even in our drought-stricken region of the southeast, we have a number of applicants in that area. And then finally, the slide may not be clear to you, but in terms of experience, we have a third of the applicants are truly beginning farmers, less than 2 years or more or less experience. And on the other end of the picture, we have those who have 5+ to 10 years experience, who have considerable skills and resources to bring into our agricultural communities. Next slide. Next slide. There it is. So this is what the matching process looks like very quickly. Landowners and aspiring farmers fill out an application that addresses their resources, their goals, their needs, and then we take those completed questionnaires and we look at potential prospects. I review each match to ensure that the interests and goals of both parties are compatible and that they have the skill sets and capabilities to actually take over a given farm operation. So the goal, in the end, is to address all the critical issues and help craft a lease that will be equitable and fair and legal for both parties. Next slide. So this is just a list of the number of technical resources that we will have online soon. We're going through an evaluation process with the Building Farmers Training Team at CSU to ensure that we have continuity between our two organizations. Next slide. In terms of education opportunities, I just wanted to emphasize that this segment of beginning farmers with less than 2 years experience, we're well aware before we can make a match that these folks need to go through a self-assessment process. So they need to go through an entry-level educational experience to be able to understand what it's going to take to start and manage an enterprise that they're thinking about for their farm. We are also seeing internship and employment opportunities coming into our database. And we make referrals to the Beginning Farmers Training Program because it's important that these folks develop the skills and knowledge they're going to need to be successful at their farm enterprise. And then, of course, the farm succession and estate planning work in which we go in and work with farm families to help them facilitate through a farm succession plan. Next slide. And so we've identified this entry-level course that will have 4 segments to it. It would be an online self-assessment course as exploring your small farm dream and really helping these folks determine if starting an agricultural business is right for them at this stage of the game. So there are 4 different areas that we look into. One is assessing yourself on a personal level, learning how to do the research you need around the enterprise you want to create, evaluate your physical and financial resources for developing that enterprise, and then finally making that decision and planning your next steps. Next slide. And I won't dwell on this, but I've talked to you about the farm succession planning, but what's interesting here is that looking at the last data point there, 90% of farm owners do not have an exit strategy or know how to develop one. And if landowners don't, retiring farmers don't plan ahead, if there's not a 5-year succession plan in place, then very often these agricultural lands will be sold just to pay down estate taxes and take care of the farm heirs, and we lose that farm from agricultural production. Next slide. And so we're working with the International Farming Transition Network out of Iowa. John Baker is a lawyer. He developed the first land link program in the country. He is working here with a team of agricultural providers and professionals to develop the skill sets to go in and work with farm families on farm succession, helping them set their goals and a step-by-step process of crafting that farm succession plan, because this is a key bottleneck to available farmland. Next slide. And so just to finish my presentation here, these are our priorities moving forward. First of all, we want to work on outreach and engaging landowners because obviously they may not yet be aware of the services that a land link program can assist them with. So this will be the next step of our program. We also want to work on regional expansion, and that is creating teams of organizations in every region where there are people on the ground that can do the meet and greet between landowners and next generation farmers, and also assist with the matching process. We're working on a new website and getting ready to put these technical resources online, and then facilitating an educational programs and training that will assist these young farmers in being successful. And so that's it. That's my presentation. We can go to the next slide, and this is my contact information. Would love to hear from anyone. If I can be of assistance, it would be great to hear from you, so thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, David. The work you guys are doing is just amazing and clearly so important, as you've shown the case for. And I think that key theme of collaboration, and you don't have to go at this alone, and it's really tough to go at it alone, but that those resources are there and those partners are there to work with you is really essential. And want to remind everybody to submit your questions as we're going, because we will have some time at the end. So please do go ahead and type in your questions, and if you know who they're for, if you would include that as well. Our third and last speaker is Adrian Card with CSU Extension. He's going to speak to building capacity in the next generation of farmers. Continuing on this theme, he is the CSU Extension Agent in Agriculture and Natural Resources for Boulder County. Adrian's worked in local foods in Colorado for the past 20 years as a vegetable farmer in Larimer County, and as a student instructor, two different things, a student, an instructor, and a researcher at CSU, and he continues that work in his current position, working directly with farmers, NGOs, and the public sector. His extension work focuses on food systems, specialty crop production and marketing, beginning farmer development, food and agriculture policy, agriculture community development, and organizational development support for the newly emerging Colorado Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association. So amazing work that Adrian has been doing and continues to do to push this forward. So with that, Adrian, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us over this lunch hour, and really appreciate all the comments that Sophie and David made. So to bring up the final presentation here, I'll try to go quickly so we have time for Q&A. So if we look out along the continuum of needs of beginning farmers, we've heard from both Sophie and David elements that we see here: business planning and management skills, production management skills, access to these productive assets, land, financing, and water. We clearly see that David and the work through Guidestone that we're collaborating on together, that land access piece being critical, and the continuing education piece is always very critical. That may happen through the public sector, private sector, NGOs, and what's really not listed there, but critically shown through what Sophie presented is also other farmers that we also embrace through our program. So next slide. Building Farmers in the West is a project that has taken roots from a notable beginning farmer development program in the Midwest. I was able to hear from these speakers back in 2006, and they are part of the Land Stewardship Project, the Farm Beginnings program, and got to hear how they structured their program and encouragement from a colleague at ATRA. And we began to form this concept in Colorado in 2006 of a community-based beginning farmer development program. 2007, we were able to launch this and pilot it in Boulder County around a curriculum that focused on the business planning and management aspects of beginning farmer success. Grants came along the way. We started in 2007 with local funds, Boulder County Parks and Open Space, Boulder County Farmers Market, funds from Colorado State University. By 2009, we had enough traction to submit a proposal to the Western Center for Risk Management Education. We're funded to expand the program throughout Colorado. Again, in 2009, we were one of the first recipients as this program came out of USDA, the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program. We branded as Building Farmers in the West and began to share this model through Western states. And in 2012, we've refined it back to a Colorado-based program with partners in Wyoming and in Arizona, and have developed advanced curriculum through the program. And there's our website if you want to read more, buildingfarmers.colostate.edu. Next slide. So our niche is the first two columns of that chart I showed earlier, that business planning and management aspect and the production management skills piece. So as we begin to look out and talk about beginning farmers, and maybe Sophie would confirm this and David as well, the sexy part about learning farming is the production side of it. Everyone wants to learn how to produce crops, how to raise livestock. Most people don't get as excited about the planning side of things and the record-keeping side of things. And our advisory committees that are the core of Building Farmers told us from the initial framing, take out all of the production curriculum. Let's just focus on the business planning and management, because in fact that's where businesses often fail. They they don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. And we know that in the first 5 years or so for most startup small businesses, regardless in the ag sector or other sectors of the economy, about 85% of them fail. So if we can give folks those skills to start up in a strong way, oftentimes delaying their entry into business launch, they're prepared to launch in a more informed way and pointed towards greater success. So our production and management aspects, we bring in mentors, pay those mentors to serve in the program, and offer internships. As Sophie indicated, that's a primary learning method that we see beginning farmers wanting that on-farm experience. And we're still in the process of focusing and better understanding how to partner with and promote incubator farms in Colorado. We have one in the works with our program and a collaborator with Fort Lewis College in La Plata County, and one in the development phases in Larimer County. We, much like Sophie said as well, back to this slide, our niche, we focus on specialty crops and niche livestock producers, lower entry costs. Interesting to see that her study confirms this as well. But our program is not limited to that audience, but we find that that barrier to entry is less in that area. So next slide, please. Mission of the program, two big monikers, build capacity and build community. So you've seen some of those methods and strategies through how we build capacity. We're very community-based as well. Much like National Young Farmers Coalition, we feel that where agriculture is learned through a community, it's going to create those linkages that point beginning farmers towards success. So our evening classes for principles of business planning and management start with a dinner over the first hour. And that's where the community begins to get networked, and also through mentorships that networking continues. So next slide, please. Continuing with that community anchoring, our basic program, I should say first, is founded in a core curriculum around strategic business planning, marketing planning, financial planning, and record keeping. That's brought before local advisory committees in any county where these programs are offered. And we've been in Larimer and Boulder and Denver and Pueblo and La Plata and San Miguel and Chaffee and in Delta counties. The advisory committee takes the core curriculum and says, well, what are the local conditions? Are we ready for a program? Do we have the right resources in the program to plug in farmers as presenters in the program, as other resource providers as presenters in the program? They really help to shape it, provide that decision, prioritization, and relevancy, and help us gain local traction and local support. Next slide. Here's our core curriculum again, and in addition to that, local advisory committees can work with extension staff around the state who anchor these programs as coordinators to add on these cafeteria options. Those could be contracts, could be food safety, agritourism, labor management, local resources available, lots of other possibilities. And we've developed curriculum on many of these that you see in the list, and there's base curriculum for all the core curriculum elements. Next slide, please. Every good presentation has one slide that's hard to read for everyone, but wanted to include this and show where we see our framework and ecosystem, where we link up with Guidestone. Beginning farmer levels in that left column, we begin to plug in with folks. This is an application by application program, so there are folks that apply to this at our local advisory committees. Those farmers and professionals that sit on that committee, they find that some folks are not quite ready for this class. And where they're not ready to engage with our principles of business planning and management, we're working with Guidestone to develop this Exploring a Farm Dreams program for these folks who have no experience yet. But once they come through our program, their synthesis project at the end of 8 night classes is to develop a basic business plan that they present to the class. They get a certificate of completion, and once they have that, they're eligible to apply for internships, for mentorships. We will also have available to them in the class these self-assessments where they can look and see what their skills are relative, relative to themselves. And additionally, we've added on these advanced classes and financial risk management, labor management, and a capstone class, developing yourself as a business leader. Next slide, please. So far, we have, since 2007, 350 individuals have come through the program, and we have tried to measure these impacts along the way. One of the reasons we've been able to secure funding is good evaluation data. and all indicate that we have been an incredible component of increasing their knowledge of business planning and management, and none of them generally acknowledge that as a continuing barrier to their success, and they all recommend it to others. So, next slide, please. Here is a new organization that was mentioned briefly in the introduction, and this layers into all of the discussions we've been having in as much as fruit and vegetables are the place where many beginning farmers start. There has been no one touch point, one single organization in the state of Colorado that represented all commercial fruit and vegetable growers. So we started this up this year. We're a 501c6 business league. I'm supporting the board in development capacity. The board's made up of, let me finish on this one more time. The board's made up of representatives from the western Colorado Tri-River area, Mesa, Delta, and Montrose counties, from northern Colorado, from southeast Colorado, the San Luis Valley, and we have board member position available from the southwest Colorado. But the main goal of the organization is to improve business conditions. We'll be having engagement around Food Safety Modernization Act, around the EPA revisions to the Worker Protection Standard, to the waters of the U.S. But we'll be that voice for policy and media and other resources to growers. There's our website, coloradoproduce.org, and you can follow us on Facebook as well. And that is all for me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Adrian. That was a lot. It was a lot from everybody. So if everyone could submit any questions that you may have for our great presenters, I think, again, those very common themes, both collaboration, building community, and the need for resources and connections are, and building the competencies and thinking not just about what it takes to grow your fruits and vegetables or your grains or raising your animals, but also in thinking about this from a business perspective is absolutely essential. So I do encourage you all to submit your questions, and while we're waiting, also ask that everybody please complete the follow-up survey that will come in the email probably tomorrow. And in that email, you will also get links to this presentation as well as to all the websites that were mentioned throughout, so you can check out the National Young Farmers Coalition. You can check out the Colorado Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association and the other resources that were highlighted, and can also contact any of the speakers. I also want to highlight the LiveWell Colorado Food Systems Toolbox that also is a repository for resources around all aspects of the food system, including growing. And I think I see one question so far, so we'll hit with that question, and then if anybody has any more, please do submit them. This question is for David. David, does your work include urban land available for producers in the Denver metro area who are seeking to produce local produce?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the goal here is to work on small-scale agriculture enterprise and small parcels of land all the way to very large parcels of land. But again, what I am finding as I work with landowners is that we need to help them address all the questions that would go into a well-crafted lease so that there's clear agreements between the next generation farmer and the landowner. And we are talking with the Conservation District, the Colorado Association of Conservation Districts, about making this more aware to urban landowners that there are small parcels of ground that will contribute to the local food production in a given community, and that these are valuable resources to rebuild the local food source. Did that answer the question?
I believe it did. So if the person who asked that question has a follow-up, please feel free to type that in. And if we have any other questions, we'd love to hear them. In the meantime, if any of our speakers have anything else that you want to add on, because we do have a few more minutes before we wrap up. So David, Adrian, Sophie, anything that you heard from one another or things that you're thinking that you want to make sure you reinforce, we'd love to hear them now.
I'd like to say I think we're even though we've been at this for a couple of years in Colorado, we're just hitting our stride. I think if we heard that National Young Farmers is about 4 years old and getting work done in Colorado, and Guidestone really getting their feet wet, and LandLink, we're just getting started in this. So stay tuned for our collaborative efforts. I think there's a lot of good work to be done ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is David. I agree. We have to go slow to go fast, and that simply means we need to build the resources that will allow us to be really effective at this work of helping make, for example, good, successful land matches. So we haven't been in a big hurry to go out and reach out across Colorado, but I think we're reaching that stage now where we need to make landowners particularly aware of the value of such a program to their own goals. And so, again, going slow to go fast just means we're getting to a point now where we can roll this thing out statewide and work with our collaborations with our different partners and organizations and really scale the program up. And I'm just speaking to the LandLink program here.
I agree.
And for all the beginning farmers or those thinking about farming on the phone, we're David and I both coming from farming background, and Sophie currently doing that as well. I think we might all suggest that this is a risky occupation. So be eyes wide open walking towards this. There's a lot of buzz in the United States about being a farmer. It's a noble occupation, but it is a challenging one. But it comes with many rewards as well. But there's a lot to learn, and the more you learn, I work with farmers that have been doing this for 30 or 40 years, and they're always learning something new. So learn as much as you can and be very informed as you walk towards this.
Yeah. America needs more young farmers, so I encourage everyone to at least look into it if you are looking for a career. As you both have mentioned, that it is hard work, but there are people out there fighting for you on an organizational level, but also you can join with other young farmers and make your voices heard. And we're making really big strides in the USDA and Congress with the new Farm Bill. That the Farm Bill in general this year has been pretty status quo in terms of direct payments and subsidies. But what really made an impact was the overall support for beginning farmers. So I think this is like a really exciting nonpartisan issue where both sides of the aisle can come together and see that America needs more young farmers. And we have a progressive administration, so I think that there's so much that we can do now to make it easier to start a farm. Yeah. And
a really good point, Sophie, that this is really a nonpartisan issue, and I think we'll continue to see this in subsequent farm bills, that it can ultimately be viewed as a national security issue, that we want to make sure that we have onshore food production. So.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And
I also now for our food in future years. Yep.
Yeah, I think David here. I just think one of the areas where collaboration can happen is working at a state legislative level as well. And I think, one of the things we want to advocate for, or I should say participate, being a voice for, is for a beginning farmers tax incentive that will help landowners see the value of leasing to the next generation or selling to the next generation of farmers. There aren't too many states that have that one in place. So, but that takes a collaborative voices working together to provide the thrust behind legislation like that in any given state. So anyway, I just want to re-emphasize the importance in our organizations working together and seeing the different roles that we play in that process.
Yeah, and there's a lot to learn from some states, particularly Massachusetts and Vermont. They provide a lot of matching funding to conservation organizations to put land in preservation. And Massachusetts in particular, every land conservation easement that they support with state funding must include affordability provisions. So an extra piece on a conservation easement where the land must be sold to a working farmer, which really puts the land into the sort of range of a working farmer's budget, while also making sure that the land stays in production. So that is a state program that would be really well to be replicated in Colorado and other states.
Interesting.
Well, we thank you all for that off-the-cuff commentary. I think that's great. And I made a note of that state legislative opportunity. I think that bringing together voices, there are a couple efforts that are going on and that are kind of in their emerging stages, so it's exciting. We do have one last question that I want to throw out to whoever wants to answer. With the succession planting and advanced methods being employed, do native crops play into these new sustainable ways?
Well, I think it depends on native to where. I think we can see in some places of Colorado, especially San Luis Valley, we see one of the nodes of quinoa production in the United States. That's one that we could look at as maybe a larger cropping system that may not be the easiest to enter into, but it can certainly be part of that beginning farmer portfolio.
Great. Has anyone else? David, did you have anything to add?
I don't, honestly, right off the top.
Okay. That's fine. Well, thank you all. Again, thank you to our fabulous presenters, Sophie, Adrian, and David. And as they've all said, they welcome you reaching out to them, and their contact information will be provided, as well as links to the websites that they referenced. And I hope that you all have found this to be of value and will complete the survey. Our next webinar in April is on creating and enhancing access to healthy food retail in your community and funding opportunities for Colorado. And as Kate mentioned, you can find information about, find this webinar information about other webinars on LiveWell Colorado's website. So thank you all again for your time and your interest in this topic, and we look forward to having you on a future webinar. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.